Why am I surrounded with idiots? This chapter is about the difference between knowledge and mastery. Knowledge can be acquired through books, universities, training programs, and professional experience. But mastery appears only when knowledge is transformed into judgment, behavior, communication, decisions, relationships, and execution under pressure. In real professional life, ideas do not fail only because they are technically weak. They often fail because people misunderstand each other, conflict is misdiagnosed, negotiations are badly prepared, cultures are misread, teams are poorly designed, power is ignored, leadership is reduced to personality, and organizations lack the systems needed to convert ambition into performance. This is why the skills covered in this chapter are not soft skills. They are core professional disciplines. Communication is a system of meaning. Conflict is diagnostic intelligence. Negotiation is the management of interdependence. Culture is the invisible operating system behind behavior. Teams are performance systems. Politics is the practical reality of power, resources, and influence. Leadership is the disciplined mobilization of people through uncertainty. Organizational development is the creation of adaptive capacity. Business execution is the integration of strategy, value, money, operations, governance, and purpose. The aim is not to simplify these subjects. The aim of this section is to present them as transferable mastery level skills for people who want to build, lead, negotiate, transform, and deliver. Why skills matter more than titles. Formal education. Titles and credentials matter. They provide intellectual discipline, social legitimacy, and access to certain professional environments. But they do not, by themselves, produce results. The decisive question is not only what a person knows. The deeper question is whether that knowledge can be translated into behavior, judgment, relationships, decisions, and execution. This distinction is essential. Knowledge is potential. Skill is applied knowledge. Mastery begins when knowledge, experience, emotional discipline, and situational judgment operate together under pressure. Many people can analyze problems. Fewer can intervene in a system without increasing disorder. Many can describe complexity. Fewer can act inside complexity without losing clarity. Many can criticize institutions, teams, and leaders. Fewer can mobilize people, resources, and decisions to improve them. The most important skills are therefore not decorative. They are not secondary to real work. They are the real work of leadership, management, consulting, and project execution. Communication, conflict diagnosis, negotiation, cultural intelligence, team design, political awareness, leadership, organizational development, strategic thinking, and execution discipline determine whether ideas survive contact with reality. The central lesson is this: serious competence is not measured only by intellectual sophistication. It is measured by the capacity to create movement in complex human systems. Communication is a system of meaning. Communication is often reduced to speaking, presenting, or writing. At a higher professional level, communication is the coordination of meaning between actors who never fully share the same assumptions. A sender has an intention. The sender encodes that intention into language, structure, tone, timing, visual signals, and nonverbal behavior. The receiver then decodes the message through their own experience, interests, fears, role, status, culture, and expectations. This means that meaning is not mechanically transferred, it is reconstructed. Many professional failures begin in the gap between what the sender intended and what the receiver understood. That is why senior communication is not simply about clarity of expression. It is about the management of interpretation. The communicator must ask, what ambiguity must be reduced? What action should become possible? What misunderstanding is predictable? What emotional, political, or cultural filters will shape reception? What feedback loop will confirm that meaning was actually understood? In complex projects, communication is not administrative noise. It is a governance mechanism. It defines reality, distributes attention, aligns expectations, activates responsibility, and enables coordinated action. The central lesson is this: communication is not the transfer of words, it is the construction of shared operational meaning. At an advanced professional level, listening is not politeness, it is diagnostic work. A skilled listener does not merely receive sentences, they detect interests, anxieties, assumptions, omissions, contradictions, symbolic signals, readiness for action, and resistance to change. This requires restraint. Many educated professionals listen only to reply, correct, defend, or demonstrate superior understanding. But influence begins before argument. It begins with accurate diagnosis. Active listening means suspending premature judgment, asking open questions, checking assumptions, paraphrasing meaning, observing emotional signals, and allowing enough silence for deeper information to emerge. Framing is the next level of communication. The same reality must be translated differently depending on the audience. A scientist may need evidence. A senior manager may need strategic relevance. A civil servant may need procedural legitimacy. A donor may need impact. A political actor may need visibility and risk control. A team member may need role clarity. This is not manipulation. It is cognitive alignment. Influence is created when a message becomes intelligible, relevant, and actionable inside the listener's world. The central lesson is this: high-level communication is not saying what is true in one's own language. It is making truth usable for others. Conflict is often treated as disturbance. In serious professional practice, conflict should first be treated as diagnostic intelligence. Conflict reveals where a system is under tension. It may expose incompatible goals, scarce resources, unclear authority, symbolic threats, competing values, communication failures, weak governance, cultural misinterpretation, role ambiguity, inter-role tension, or emotional injury. Mature conflict work therefore begins with classification. Is this a false feud caused by misunderstanding or missing information? Is it an optional conflict caused by individual differences, perceptions, or assumptions? Is it a manageable conflict around scarce resources or roles? Or is it a conflict of mutually exclusive interests, values, or goals? This classification prevents naive resolution. The central lesson is this: conflict is not automatically dysfunction. Often, it is the point at which reality breaks through the official narrative. Most conflicts escalate because people react to perceived meaning before verifying reality. They do not respond only to what happened. They respond to what they believe the event means: disrespect, incompetence, betrayal, manipulation, loss of status, or threat to identity. Unpacking conflict means slowing down the interpretive process. Before intervention, one must separate facts, assumptions, emotions, interests, behaviors, needs, and desired outcomes. This is not a soft exercise. It is disciplined analysis. The first movement is internal. Notice the moment. Stop, breathe, and prevent automatic reaction. The second movement is diagnostic. Identify what each side wants, why each side feels blocked, what each side assumes, and how those assumptions produce behavior. The third movement is relational. Paraphrase, clarify, and help the other side unpack its own position. A conflict often becomes more manageable when each side can distinguish between what it wants and what it genuinely needs. The leader or mediator must also assess how much energy the conflict deserves. Some conflicts require collaboration, some require negotiation, some require boundary setting, some should be avoided because they are symptoms of a deeper problem. The central lesson is this: the first task in conflict is not to win. It is to understand the structure of disagreement well enough to choose the right intervention. Conflict styles should not be treated as personality labels. They are strategic responses under different conditions of power, time, risk, relationship, and importance. Avoidance may be intelligent when the issue is minor, premature, emotionally overheated, or impossible to resolve in the current context. It becomes destructive when it hides fear or avoidance of responsibility. Accommodation may preserve social capital when the issue is secondary. It becomes dangerous when it normalizes self erasure or teaches others that one's interests can be ignored. Compromise can stabilize a situation under time pressure, but it can also institutionalize mediocrity if the problem requires a creative solution. Competition may be necessary when safety, ethics, law, or strategic survival are at stake, but habitual competition destroys trust and creates resistance. Negotiation is appropriate when interests differ, but agreement remains possible. Collaboration is powerful when there are common goals, relational value, and sufficient trust to search for a higher order solution. Breakdown is the warning zone. It indicates that communication, trust, or willingness to solve the problem has collapsed. The sophisticated practitioner does not worship one style, they read the system. The central lesson is this: conflict maturity means matching intervention style to the nature of the conflict and to the consequences of action or inaction. Conflict can be one of the most valuable resources available to a leader because it exposes what polite systems conceal. Organizations often perform harmony. Meetings produce apparent consensus. Minutes record agreement. Presentations suggest progress. Yet beneath the surface, there may be fear, resistance, resentment, competition, loss of trust, or unresolved ambiguity. Conflict punctures the performance of agreement. It reveals where the system can no longer contain contradiction. A sophisticated leader does not romanticize conflict, but also does not suppress it reflexively. They ask what the conflict is making visible. Perhaps authority is formally assigned, but informally contested. Perhaps the strategy lacks credibility. Perhaps the official problem is not the real problem. Conflict becomes productive when it is converted into inquiry, redesign, and renegotiation. This requires emotional discipline and courage because real conflict often reveals truths that the system would prefer not to discuss. The central lesson is this: conflict is destructive when personalized, suppressed, or exploited. It becomes a resource when used to reveal reality and improve the system. Negotiation is not merely bargaining, it is the structured management of interdependence. Whenever two or more actors need something from each other, negotiation exists, whether formally recognized or not. The elementary negotiator argues over positions. The mature negotiator investigates interests. A position is the visible demand. An interest is the underlying reason the demand matters. Positions are often rigid because they become symbolic. They carry ego, status, fear, and public commitment. Interests are more flexible because they reveal the actual architecture of need, risk, aspiration, or constraint. Negotiation also depends on alternatives. A party's real power is not determined only by title, morality, or argument quality. It is shaped by what that party can realistically do if no agreement is reached. This is why preparation matters more than performance. A serious negotiator understands interests, alternatives, limits, options, objective criteria, trade offs, dependencies, and implementation risks. Good negotiation produces commitments that can survive implementation. The central lesson is this: negotiation is the art of converting difference, interdependence, and potential conflict into agreements that can function in reality. Projects are negotiation systems disguised as implementation structures. The work plan may show tasks, deadlines, deliverables, responsibilities, and budgets. But beneath the formal structure lies continuous negotiation over status, authority, resources, visibility, risk, and accountability. Who leads, who decides, who receives recognition, who carries responsibility, who controls information, who absorbs failure, who benefits from success? These questions are never neutral. In business, similar dynamics appear around price, scope, delivery quality, payment terms, intellectual property, liability, deadlines, future cooperation, and reputational risk. Many project failures occur because negotiation is postponed until conflict becomes unavoidable. Mature project leadership negotiates expectations early. It clarifies roles, documents commitments, tests assumptions, defines escalation procedures, and distinguishes goodwill from enforceable agreement. It also recognizes that different actors enter the project with different incentive structures. A partner may want budget, a sponsor may want visibility, a client may want certainty, a consultant may want margin, a technical team may want quality, a public institution may want legitimacy. The central lesson is this: serious professionals do not treat negotiation as an event, they treat it as the architecture of cooperation. Culture is not decoration, it is not flags, food, music, or polite diversity language. Culture is a deep operating system that shapes perception, expectation, and behavior. It defines what people consider respectful, rational, urgent, fair, ambitious, loyal, professional, or unacceptable. Culture influences attitudes toward hierarchy, uncertainty, time, rules, individual responsibility, group loyalty, risk, disagreement, feedback, and trust. The difficulty is that culture is often invisible to those inside it. People rarely experience their own assumptions as cultural. They experience them as normal, obvious, and rational. This is why intercultural work requires intellectual humility. Cultural frameworks are useful only if they are used as analytical lenses, not as stereotypes. They help us ask better questions. Does a person avoid disagreement because they agree or because open disagreement is culturally costly? Is delay a sign of incompetence or a sign that hierarchy must be consulted? Is silence consent, caution, resistance, or respect? Culture does not determine everything, but it shapes the meaning of almost everything. The central lesson is this: in international work, the failure to understand culture is often the failure to understand the operating system behind behavior. Intercultural negotiation and cooperation. Intercultural negotiation is complex because parties are not only negotiating issues, they are also negotiating assumptions about negotiation itself. Different cultures carry different expectations about directness, hierarchy, trust building, written commitments, emotional expression, time, personal relationships, decision authority, and the meaning of agreement. One side may believe efficiency requires directness. Another may experience directness as aggression. This is why intercultural competence requires more than language fluency. It requires interpretive discipline. The sophisticated professional avoids both arrogance and paralysis. They neither impose their own norms blindly nor romanticize cultural difference as an excuse for poor performance. They clarify, they confirm, they observe informal decision making. The central lesson is this: intercultural mastery means translating not only language, but expectations, status, trust, and decision logic. Teamwork as a performance system. A team is not a moral slogan, it is a performance system. People often confuse teams with groups, committees, or collections of talented individuals. The failure of teams is rarely caused only by lack of intelligence. More often, teams fail because goals are ambiguous, roles are unclear, incentives are misaligned, trust is weak, conflict is avoided, leadership is passive, or standards are inconsistent. Team development is dynamic. Groups usually move through phases of orientation, tension, norm creation, and performance. The tension phase is not automatically a sign of failure. It may be the necessary stage in which authority, expectations, working rules, and hidden conflicts become visible. The leader's task is not to eliminate all tension, it is to prevent tension from becoming fragmentation. This requires disciplined team maintenance, clarifying, summarizing, encouraging, confronting, setting standards, checking progress, resolving ambiguity, and protecting the link between purpose and action. The central lesson is this: teams do not perform because talented people are assembled. They perform when interdependence is designed, governed, and led. Belbin and the logic of complementarity. Team role theory teaches a powerful principle. Collective performance depends on complementarity, not similarity. A mature team does not need everyone to contribute in the same way. It needs the right combination of creative generation, External exploration, coordination, drive, critical judgment, relational maintenance, implementation discipline, completion quality, and specialist depth. The plant generates ideas. The resource investigator connects the team to external opportunities. The coordinator clarifies purpose and integrates contributions. The shaper creates urgency and momentum. The monitor evaluator protects analytical judgment. The team worker sustains cooperation. The implementer turns intention into practical work. The completer finisher protects quality and deadlines. The specialist brings deep expertise. The danger in teams is not difference. The danger is unmanaged difference. The central lesson is this. The question is not who is impressive individually, but which contribution the system needs in order to perform. Essential conditions for a real team. A real team requires conditions, not slogans. The most important conditions are a clear and elevating goal, a structure oriented toward results, competent members, unified commitment, collaborative climate, standards of excellence, external support, and principled leadership. Each condition performs a function. The goal creates direction. Structure translates direction into coordinated work. Competence makes execution possible. Commitment sustains effort beyond convenience. Collaboration allows information and trust to circulate. Standards prevent mediocrity from becoming normal. External support gives legitimacy, resources, and protection. Leadership integrates the whole system. When teams fail, one or more of these conditions is usually damaged. The sophisticated team leader diagnoses conditions before blaming personalities. The central lesson is this: team performance is not accidental chemistry. It is the outcome of designed conditions and disciplined leadership. Power, politics, and project reality. Politics is not an abnormal feature of organizations. It is a permanent feature of collective life. One must become literate in power. Who formally decides? Who informally influences? Who controls scarce resources? Who can delay action? Who has access to senior decision makers? Who benefits from ambiguity? Who fears transparency? Who will be exposed if the project succeeds? Politics is often the hidden layer beneath formal project management. The central lesson is this: ethical professionals must understand power, because power will operate whether they understand it or not.
Power bases, dependency, and influence. Power is often misunderstood as formal authority. In reality, power has several bases. Legitimate power comes from formal position. Reward power comes from the ability to provide valued benefits. Coercive power comes from the ability to punish. Expert power comes from knowledge and competence. Referent power comes from trust, identification, and personal credibility. These power bases do not produce the same outcomes. Coercive power often produces resistance. Legitimate and reward power may produce compliance. Expert and referent power are more likely to produce commitment. This distinction is crucial. Compliance may be enough for routine administration, but it is rarely enough for innovation, reform, or adaptive change. In complex projects, people often follow the person who can reduce uncertainty, interpret complexity, protect the group, and create confidence. Power is also linked to dependency. A resource creates power when it is important, scarce, and difficult to substitute. That resource may be budget, expertise, information, access, legitimacy, technology, institutional trust, or political protection. The central lesson is this: formal authority can command behavior, but expert and referent power create commitment, especially when formal authority is limited.
Leadership development beyond personality. Leadership is often reduced to personality, charisma, confidence, dominance, energy, or visibility. This is intellectually and scientifically weak. Leadership is better understood as the capacity to mobilize people toward meaningful work under conditions of uncertainty, resistance, and competing interests. This requires self-awareness, but also role awareness, system awareness, and adaptive capacity. Adaptive leadership and organizational development. The distinction between technical problems and adaptive challenges is one of the most important distinctions in leadership. Technical problems can be solved by expertise, authority, procedure, technology, or resources. Adaptive challenges require learning and people to change. They require shifts in behavior, values, identity, power relationships, loyalties, habits, and assumptions. Many organizations fail because they apply technical solutions to adaptive problems. The main types of adaptive challenges are not technical problems with ready-made answers. They are deeper human and organizational challenges. They include the gap between stated values and actual behavior. They include competing commitments, where people publicly support change while privately protecting something that prevents change. They include dependency on authority, where people expect leaders or experts to solve problems that require collective learning and behavioral change. They include identity and role change, where people must stop behaving as they used to and grow into new responsibilities. They include conflicting values such as efficiency versus inclusion, transparency versus control, innovation versus stability, or merit versus loyalty. Adaptive leadership requires bringing uncomfortable realities into view without destroying the system's capacity to function. Organizational development then becomes the disciplined effort to increase the system's capacity to learn, adapt, and perform. The central lesson is this: sustainable change is not produced by plans alone. It is produced when systems learn new ways of thinking, deciding, and behaving. Not all projects require the same leadership logic. A concrete project has relatively clear outputs, known methods, established procedures, and available know-how. It can be managed with stronger planning, control, sequencing, and technical coordination. An occasional project is less routine. It often cuts across departments, cultures, or professional boundaries. It may be used to introduce change, redesign processes, or create new forms of cooperation. An open project is more exploratory. Outputs are not fully known at the beginning. The work requires experimentation, learning, trial, review, and adaptation. A common managerial error is to apply concrete project control logic to open or adaptive projects. Strategic thinking, business model, and execution. Strategy is not ambition. Strategy is disciplined choice under conditions of scarcity. Every person, organization, and business has limited time, attention, credibility, money, people, and energy. Strategy decides where these scarce resources should be concentrated. A strategic mind does not ask only what is possible. It asks what is worth pursuing. Market reality introduces the discipline of external validation. An idea is not a business because the founder believes in it. It becomes a business only when a defined customer segment recognizes value strongly enough to act, pay, and return. The value proposition explains why the offer matters. The business model explains how relevance becomes revenue, margin, and sustainability. Marketing creates understanding. Sales converts trust into commitment. Operations deliver the promise. Finance protects survival. Risk management protects continuity. Governance clarifies decision rights. KPIs distinguish real performance from imagined progress. Scaling tests whether the system can grow without losing quality. The central lesson is this: execution is rare because it requires integration across people, strategy, money, systems, governance, and purpose. Sustainable success belongs to those who can build systems that continue to produce value under pressure. Thank you. The purpose of this chapter was not to present a list of fashionable management concepts. The purpose was to show the architecture of professional mastery. The real measure of knowledge is not what we can explain. It is what we can build, improve, lead, and leave behind.